Yeah, I can hear you. How's it going?
I just wanted to make this quick, 'cause I'm sure you have a lot to get to, but I wanted to know, what is the U.S. doing in terms of, I think the only way to fix the issue with what's happening in Gaza, with Hamas, with Israel and everything like that, we have to just defund Israel and send funding and aid to Gaza. There's no other way around that. We're
Mhm.
funding a genocide, and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely understand your concern. And in fact, one of the things that I've been raising continually is the nature of U.S. aid to Israel and how unique it has been, and the way that it, in my view, has potentially added to the unreal human cost of what we're seeing in Gaza. Um, the United States does not condition its aid to Israel, and not in the way that it does to nearly any one of our other allies. And we've heard this sentiment repeated. We've heard it repeated by the US administration saying that there's quote unquote no red line when it comes to US aid to Israel. And I want to be clear that I am in complete disagreement and opposition to that policy. To me, regardless of the government, if we say that there is no red line, that there is absolutely nothing that any recipient of US aid can do in order to stop that aid or in order to make us second guess that aid, we are really risking writing a blank check for atrocity. And I do not believe that that is a responsible policy. We actually have laws, US domestic laws that we must adhere to, known as Leahy laws. And what Leahy laws say, these are laws that are currently in the books in the United States, is saying that recipients, forces that are recipients of US military aid, cannot be engaging in gross human rights violations. And if they are engaged in gross human rights violations, then that aid must be either pulled, reconsidered, conditioned, etc. Now, in my view, and I think in the view of many people in our community, and I want to take a moment to also say that thousands of you all, thousands of constituents, confirmed constituents, have been calling into my office, calling for a ceasefire, calling for the conditioning of aid. So it's not just my view, but this is also the view of our community, is that what we are witnessing is the gross violation of human rights in Gaza. And that is being done with US military assistance. And so I think the point that you are raising is an important one. You know, to that end, I've been advocating very heavily for the conditioning of US aid on human rights grounds. And the good news of that is that I do believe that that view is starting to gain traction and gain momentum. I cannot understate how significant that shift is. This has never really happened before. It's quite unprecedented in U.S. history for there to be any sort of conversation around conditioning for the protection of human rights when it comes to military aid to the Israeli government. And I think it marks an important shift. I also want to say that I think that this is a view that, you know, is often tried to be painted as extreme, but I don't think that it is. I don't think that the American people want to see our public resources going to finance gross human rights violations. To be clear, some of the latest estimates that we have seen, as I said at the top, is over 14 to 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in just about 7 weeks. But when we look at some of the latest estimates that have been released around the number of Hamas that may have been killed, we're only looking at perhaps 1 to 2,000. And so when we look at that ratio of innocent civilians killed to combatants, it to me is patently unacceptable. And you know, there are decisions that the Israeli government has, you know, that they make as in their own sovereign body, but there are decisions that we, as a country, as our own sovereign body must make. And to me, the responsible and rather the deployment, how U.S. resources are being deployed is a very important element to this question. And it is one that we plan to continue to raise in advance. And we thank you. I thank you for raising it as well.
As we speak, in this moment, 1.1 million innocents in Gaza are at famine's door. A famine that is being intentionally precipitated through the blocking of food and global humanitarian assistance by leaders in the Israeli government. This is a mass starvation of people, engineered and orchestrated, following the killing of another 30,000, 70% of whom were women and children killed. There is hardly a single hospital left. And this was all accomplished, much of this accomplished with U.S. resources and weapons. If you want to know what an unfolding genocide looks like, open your eyes. It looks like the forced famine of 1.1 million innocents. It looks like thousands of children eating grass as their bodies consume themselves while trucks of food are slowed and halted just miles away. It looks like good and decent people who do nothing, or too little, too late. It is against United States law to provide weapons to forces who block United States humanitarian assistance. And that is exactly what is happening right now. So much so that the president himself stated during the State of the Union that the United States must and will be building its own port to let aid through. It will be too late. The time is now to force compliance with U.S. law and the standards of humanity, and fulfill our obligations to the American people to suspend the transfer of U.S. weapons to the Israeli government in order to stop and prevent further atrocity. Honoring our alliances does not mean facilitating mass killing. We cannot hide from our responsibility any longer. Blocking assistance from one's closest allies to starve 1 million people is not unintentional. We have a responsibility to prove the value of global democracy, enshrined in the upholding of civil society, rule of law, and commitment to human and civil rights. This is not just about Israel or Gaza. This is about us. The world will never be the same, and we will never be the same. And we must write our story in this moment of what it means and who we are as Americans. And our story must be not that we were good men who did nothing, but that we were a committed democracy that did something. And we must prove that now. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
You gave a very forceful speech on the House floor Friday about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. You called on President Biden to cut off U.S. military aid to Israel. I think we have a clip of part of what you said. Let's roll that.
If you want to know what an unfolding genocide looks like, open your eyes. It looks like the forced famine of 1.1 million innocents. We must write our story in this moment of what it means and who we are as Americans. And our story must be not that we were good men who did nothing.
Now, clearly not enough aid is getting in. Clearly the conditions for the Palestinian people are horrific and much more needs to be done. Genocide is a word that has serious and specific connotations and allegations. It's defined by the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So you, just to clarify here, you believe the Israeli military, the Israeli government are actively trying, they intend to destroy the Palestinian people, and not that what's happening is horrible, but it's happening because Israel is going after the terrorists of Hamas who attacked them on October 7th, and Hamas embeds within the civilian population?
Well, Jake, you're absolutely right. This word is extremely serious. It's one that's taken with extraordinary gravity. And to me, the threshold of intent is a high one. It is a serious one and is not one that is made lightly. However, when we look at the precipice of what is happening with a forced famine of 1.1 million Gazans, where multiple governments, NGOs, and even officials within the United States State Department have stated themselves plainly that the Israeli government and leaders in the Israeli government are intentionally denying, blocking, and slow walking this aid and are precipitating a mass famine. I believe we have crossed the threshold of intent. It is horrific. I think it is extremely clear and it is extremely important that all people understand the difference between people and their governments, Israelis and the Israeli government, Palestinians from Hamas. But what we are seeing here, I think, with a forced famine is beyond our ability to deny or explain away. There is no targeting of Hamas in precipitating a mass famine of 1 million people, half of whom are children.
So I asked Israeli officials about your speech, and they say, we are allowing hundreds of aid trucks into Gaza every single day. They're trying to increase those numbers. They have to inspect the cargo to make sure no weapons are getting in, weapons that would be used by Hamas against the people of Israel. Israeli officials also argue this war could end tomorrow if Hamas freed the hostages and laid down the arms. Do you disagree?
I do disagree, because when we are talking about famine, the actions of Hamas should not be tied to whether a 3-year-old can eat. The actions of Hamas do not justify forcing thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to eat grass as their bodies consume themselves. We and the Israeli government has a right to go after Hamas. But we are talking about a population of millions of innocent Palestinians. We are talking about collective punishment, which is injustifiable. And the excuses that the Israeli government is giving about what they are and are not allowing simply do not square with what the UK government is stating, with what international aid organizations are stating, and even what our own State Department officials are stating, which is that they are not allowing aid to go through. When they're talking about inspections, we're talking about U.S. aid, the United States aid. And so I think that if we are to operate as allies, then we must operate in good faith to uphold the principles of democracy, which includes respect for human rights, and also proving the value of our democracy, which is that we are different than authoritarian and we are different from other types of regimes with no regard for innocent people.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
At the time of the making of this video, according to Al Jazeera English, so far, more than 41,000 Palestinians, including more than 16,000 children, have been killed in this war. According to The Lancet, it is not implausible to estimate that the actual death toll might even be up to 186,000 or even more. This has got to stop. It's time for an arms embargo against Israel and a ceasefire now.